Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I am Andy Kirikides, joined by our usual special guest, frequenter of the podcast, Mr. Jonathan Grasset. How we doing?
What's up, dude? Fired up for a fun week. I guess really 2 weeks, right? Where the promised land is upon us. Here, we're gonna head to Omaha. Maybe next year we'll do this show live in Omaha. We'll see how it happens.
Don't threaten me with a good time. But as Mr. Grasset led in, we're gonna break down the 8 teams that made it to the College World Series here. Some pretty cool storylines we want to touch on, and then we'll make our picks. I will start off by saying this. Yeah, I'm gonna pat the old back here. I did go 8 for 8 in my super picks, so Florida came through as hard as it was for me to make that pick, given our previous stances on them.
I mean, if you think about it, in 2 years, me and you have both gone 8 for 8 in respective years. So not too shabby. If you're looking for some picks, I mean, I wouldn't have taken my picks this year. I think I was like 50-50, maybe 4 of 8. A little cold, but that's all right. We'll get it back. I feel good about these brackets here. So.
Well, I will say that while you may have taken a step back in the supers, your call on Evansville might make up for that, because you may have been the only guy in the country who said, hey, that's the 4 seed that can win a regional.
Appreciate that.
Well, shoot, we kicked it off with Florida. Let's start there. Some cool stats coming out of Florida here, and I know you got a couple of them handy for us.
Man, impressive. I will admit when I'm wrong. You know, I'm an adult. I will admit when I'm wrong. They've done a phenomenal job. Sully's done a phenomenal job. D1 baseball, I guess, was right all along. Maybe we'll give them credit too, because I was all over them. They had them ranked when they were like 2 games over 500, and I was losing my mind about it. Sully, they did awesome. I mean, it was obviously the controversial game on Sunday with the ejections and stuff like that. But all in all, they have the feel, and I've heard this the last 2 weeks, they have that Ole Miss of 2021 feel. Last team in, committee member on, AD on the committee. And they just get scorching hot, and they played so well. And for them to go into Clemson and sweep Clemson, who I was so impressed with the week before in the regional round, just basically just pounding their way through that regional, which I thought was a really good regional, pod. They got a shot, and you got Cags obviously just lurking. They got maybe the best closer in the country. They're really good, and I think the one stat, and I'll get into this because I do want to hit on this with a lot of these head coaches in this tournament in this field. Sully's done a phenomenal job there. Sully's never missed a regional there, and Sully's won 9 straight super regionals. They lost to Southern Miss, and since then he's won 9 straight super regionals. They have been in 9 of the last 14 College World Series. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy stat. With the parity, the game has changed. Now with the transfer portal, NIL money, there's a million reasons why you can make excuses why you shouldn't go to 9 out of the last 14 College World Series, and they just continue to do it. So shout out to Sully and his staff. They got him going. I think they're absolutely a threat to win this thing. I think everyone's a threat to win this thing this year. And me and Andy talked about that earlier. And we'll hit on this again. I think all 8 teams for the first time in a long time are legitimate options to win this thing. But like some of the other teams in this field, they're playing really, really good right now. And they're going to be very, very, very dangerous next week or this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's important when you take a look at Florida at this point, and we look at the stats and we look at how these guys are doing, and you take a look at all right, well, how have they performed over 60-something games? I think you have to really take a step back and look at what have they been doing the last month, specifically with some of the arms that they're running out there. These are guys that struggled early in the year that are not struggling anymore. And you look at some of their numbers, if you look at it in a vacuum, you're like, wow, that kid, like they started that kid game 2 and he's got an 8 ERA. Well, look at his last 6 outings. Like you're talking about a big left-hander who missed a year, who didn't really throw much as a freshman. And now he's got his feet wet and he's got power stuff. And he's a dude that, if he's filling up the strike zone, is as tough as anybody in the College World Series to hit. And then obviously you got Cags, but they got star power up and down that lineup, and they play the snot out of defense, and they've got legitimate power bats, which is going to be really interesting. It's always the conversation when you go to Omaha is that field is very different than all the other fields. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The other thing I think is worth noting about Sully, because I don't know if a lot of other people know this, because you get caught up in what Florida is now. When he took that program over, it was the worst facility in the SEC, and it wasn't close. It wasn't the name brand that we recognize right now. And I don't think you can overstate what he's done at that place. Obviously, he's won the national championship, but in order to win the national championship, you got to give yourself a shot, which means you got to get to the College World Series. And 9 times in 14 years, like that's ridiculous. UVA is the only other program who's had any type of success at that level where they're consistently getting to this round. They've been in the World Series 7 times since 2009. So they're scary right now. And I do think there is something about some star power. Like Caglione just seems to come up with big swings whenever they need one. And I wonder if these teams are going to make obviously A&M and Kentucky are familiar with them. They've all played. Do you just basically say that guy is flat out not beating us, and like there's an RBI situation, he ain't getting it? I don't know if you treat him like that, but up until this point, there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the last month or so where you can look back and be like, maybe we shouldn't have pitched to that dude there. I mean, I think he's that good. So yeah, we'll see what I end up picking here out of this bracket, but they're a tough one to bet against right now, the way that they're playing. To move on to another team in the SEC out of College Station. They've been as consistent as anybody in college baseball, period, and that's Texas A&M, the Aggies. My favorite college baseball park in college baseball right now. So what do you got on the Aggies?
I think again, and I'm going to hit on this with all 8 of these guys because I think there's a lot of really cool stories. Schloss takes over. He's at TCU. He did what he did at TCU. He turned them into, you talk about what Sully did, for Florida. I mean, Schloss did that at TCU, and I have no problem arguing that either. Turned them into a powerhouse. Small facility. They were in like the Mountain West, I think, when he took it over. Omaha, multiple supers. I think multiple Omahas, I believe. I think it was 3 Omahas. Goes over to College Station, goes to Texas A&M, and bang, he's been there 3 years. He's been to Omaha twice. Like, the guy's just done a phenomenal job. Like, and I think that you got to really tip your hat to him. What he's done with this program, the coaching staff. Had a new pitching guy this year. He brought in Max Wiener, who's the pitching coordinator for the Mariners. Did a phenomenal job with that staff. He obviously lost Nate Yeski to LSU, who most would argue probably that, is the best pitching coach in the entire country. Top 3, I would say, no question. Kind of splitting hairs at that point, but brings in a guy, does a phenomenal job with the staff. They did a great job with the staff. They obviously go out and get Braden Montgomery, and obviously you feel horrible for what happened to him and a freak injury. But the thing with Schloss and the thing with those guys, and Michael Early's a phenomenal hitting coach. Everyone knows that. He's he's the top 5 hitting coach in the country. The guy who replaced Braden Montgomery on Sunday, game 2, grand slam. They were up 1, they go up 5, change the game, basically put the nail in Oregon's coffin. Just wash, rinse, repeat, man. They've done a phenomenal job. Whoever they run out there, they're really good on the mound. They've been super consistent. They hit a little bit of a low point. Hit on this, I think, last week. A little bit of a low point, like 3/4 of the way through the SEC, season. They kind of hit that weird low point where like everyone was like, "Oh wait, this isn't the Texas A&M." They turned it right back on at the end. Did a nice job in Hoover. Ran through the regional. They actually haven't lost, which a lot of people don't know. They haven't lost in the postseason. After Hoover, obviously, they haven't lost. They swept their regional, swept the Super. They're good. They're going to be tough. I think the one question with them is I think this will get brought up a lot. And I think this is a question for Florida too, and a few of these other teams. And I'll bring this up again. Like, how's the ballpark playing? Because we all know Charles Schwab, how it plays. Like, it could be the biggest stadium in the world or the smallest stadium in the world. Traditionally the wind is blowing in. If you have the night game, the shadows will play with you. But how does the wind play? I think will determine a lot with some of these teams, because this is going to be the biggest venue that almost all of them play in throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting to. Yeah, I have a feeling you're going to circle back to Tennessee on this one, which is, about how the stadium plays, because those guys, they hit a lot of home runs. I think Tennessee's hitting like 2.5 home runs a game. A&M's over 2 home runs a game. So they clearly rely on that for offense. The big storyline for me with A&M, because you hit on it, I think the staff's super deep. Positionally, they're awesome. But there's 2 things that stick out to me. One, you lose one of the most dynamic players in the country, and he's done, right? It's one thing to be able to overcome it for a game. It's another thing to be able to overcome it on the biggest stage of college baseball. Do they have talent up and down that roster that they can plug in there? Do they have enough firepower in that lineup? Yeah, probably. But the other one that I don't think people were talking about, specifically because he was freaking lightning hot in the Super Regional, is Hayden Schott's playing hurt right now. Openly hurt. He's got a knee issue that he's dealing with. It obviously didn't seem to affect him too much in the Super, but they're basically playing 2 backups in the field right now. Does that end up hurting them? I don't know. But it's something that if you're gonna try to knock A&M in their chances, I do think that if you lose your starting center fielder and your starting right fielder, those are 2 pretty significant positions defensively. And you got a DH who's gonna, he played for Brett Moretti, so he's probably about as tough as they possibly come. But that's the thing that sticks out to me with A&M is, can they play a slightly different style of game when you have 2 of your biggest power threats, that one is playing hurt and the other guy is not in that lineup right now? And I think that circles back to what you're talking about with how does that field play for them? But yeah, I mean, Slosh is a serial winner. I mean, to do what he did and build a TCU program up to what he did, and obviously they maintained as a really high-level program. I mean, they're in College World Series last year. But him to take A&M to the levels that I think the A&M faithful really desired, which is we want to think that we have a chance to win a national championship every year. Like, they're there. Like, this team's good enough to win it all. So we'll see. I don't know. Maybe they'll be my pick. I'm partial to Hayden Shaw and Jackson Appel because I saw them play so much up in the Ivy League, and those 2 are just, man, are they good players. Just fantastic players. Love watching those guys play. Let's take it to Raleigh with the NC State Wolfpack, who have only lost 1 series all year long, but for some reason seem to be the quasi Cinderella pick in this. It's interesting how they've kind of slapped on that label somehow via the media. And I'm not sure if people recognize that they may not have been in the top 5 or in the running for top 1, the top spot all year, but all they've done is just win weekend after weekend after weekend, road wins. They seem to travel. They got a couple. Well, and mind you, the only weekend series they lost all year, they had their number one and their number two starters were out. So a fully intact NC State team has not lost a 3-game series all year long. That bodes pretty well in a double elimination bracket.
And I'll be honest, Andy, like you could argue this with NC State, like, and I know me and you had joked around with it, like NC State might have been the best team in the last 30 days in the country, and it might not even be close. Like Tennessee might be your only other one that you could be like, yeah, like, you know, and UVA's been really good the last 2 weeks, and obviously all these teams have been good the last 2 weeks, right? Like, yeah, idiot me saying that, right? They've all been really good, but the last like month to 45 days, NC State might be the best team in the country. And I'm not a gambling expert or anything like that, but they're going off as plus 1,200 to win the whole thing. It's crazy to me.
All right, so moving on. NC State, Raleigh. Interesting team here. They've only lost one 3-game series all year long. Somehow they have like a quasi Cinderella tag going into this, despite the fact that to only lose one series during the course of the year is just absolutely absurd. And I think it was the only series that I watched them because I think it was against Notre Dame and we were watching Ryan. And I remember coming away from that series and I think I was texting you about it. And I was like, man, I don't know how good this team is. But then you find out that that was the only weekend that they didn't have their number one and their number two guys. And when they've got their number one and two guys high, Phil, they haven't lost. And going into a double elimination 4-team tournament to get to the College World Series final, that bodes pretty well. So I know you got some thoughts on this team. What do you got on the Wolfpack?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the last 30 days, I think might be, you know, I mean, with Tennessee, I think you have to say, right, they're probably the best team in the country. They're really, really, really good. They're playing really, really, really well right now. They come out and they hammer Georgia on Friday, which are Saturday. Just second inning, they had 10 straight base runners get on base, 8 straight hits. Kind of got beat up a little bit on Sunday. It was almost like, you know, you were like, all right, well, Georgia's back now, and then you had a 1-game series. Down early, Monday night, come back, played really well. They might have the best defensive catcher in the country. Might have the best overall catcher in the country, to be honest with you. A lot of people have been kind of giving comps out to Adley Rutschman, which is pretty nice category to be in if you're him. But yeah, I mean, you know, Elliott Avent, 37 years, super impressive. I mean, you could argue, and I probably would be on this train with you. 2021, they got banned because of contact tracing, but they were in the driver's seat maybe to win the whole thing that year. Super talented. I mean, he's done a phenomenal job, and like for them to get back after kind of getting sniped there in 21, I feel really good about the Wolfpack and them getting back to Omaha here.
When I go back and I look at what they did, I can't get over the fact that they only lost one series all year long. And I don't think you can understate how impressive that is. And I just think it speaks to consistency. And I think it's hard to beat them, clearly hard to beat them multiple times. And yeah, this is a little bit different level. They're the lone ACC team that's stuck in between Kentucky, A&M, and Florida. So like you got to show up and you got to beat these SEC teams, which they've already done, beating Georgia. But They play clean. They don't rely on one particular area of the game to win. Like they don't have to pitch great. They don't have to hit home runs. The Kozar kid behind the plate defensively steals the show. Like if you like watching kids catch and you value athleticism behind the plate, you can get mesmerized watching that kid catch. He makes incredibly difficult plays behind the plate. I mean, he had a block on a slide, like an 88-mile-an-hour slider. They were getting Charlie Connon. They had a righty come in. I think I texted you. I said, this kid just threw a 91-mile-an-hour slider. And he's backhand blocking 89-mile-an-hour sliders in the left-handed batter's box that 99.9% of the catching population in the world, that ball gets to the backstop and he gobbles it up. I mean, he does some just absolutely ridiculous stuff. It's just really fun to watch. And then the Serrano kid in center field's like a gazelle. Love watching that kid play. I really like this team.
One variable too, I think, Andy, for them is like, I think you hit on this pretty good with like they can beat you a lot of different ways. Like they might have the best bullpen in this pod, and they might have the best bullpen left in this whole thing. Which winners bracket, losers bracket, as you get into that, that scenario, they got a really good shot. I think you saw that on Monday, and they they went down early. Obviously, Georgia 2-0, and that bullpen just kind of came in, and it was just like, nah, we're good, man. I mean, they let up one other run outside of the second inning, and that was a Condon. Well, Condon hit a home run in the ninth, and they let up one other run besides that the rest of the way. Goes to show you how deep that bullpen is. We all know when you're dealing with Omaha, when you're dealing with Charles Schwab Stadium, like that could be a huge part of this. Like there's no way that they should be plus 1,200 to win the whole thing, in my opinion. Like that's just crazy to me. Like I think all 8 teams can win this thing, and the fact that somebody's plus 1,200 with that roster, with how good they've looked the last 30 days, I just think that's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. And the more we talk about the Wolfpack, the more I think they got a legitimate chance to come out of this bracket. Let's move on to the first-time College World Series appearance squad out of Lexington, Kentucky, the University of Kentucky, the Wildcats. You've been on this train for
I called this in mid-April.
2 months?
I said in mid-April, late April, I said this might be the best team in the country for a stretcher. I think they were. Here's the thing with Kentucky in this pod, and I'm going to probably kind of tip my hand here and tell you who I'm going to pick to win this thing right here. But Kentucky can beat you in a million different ways, just like NC State can. Kentucky is built for this venue. It's built for this arena. It's built for this whole deal. Kentucky's built for this. Kentucky had more sack bunts. They had more stolen bases than anybody else in the SEC. They led both those categories in the SEC. That's this kind of tournament. You're going to have to pitch a little bit. There's going to be days you're going to have to hit a little bit. They can do that too. They're going to play phenomenal defense. And Nick Mingione has done a phenomenal job there. Phenomenal job there. This is a program that's never been to a super regional before he took over. He's got them in Omaha. Similar to another team we're going to hit on, he kind of got them rolling early with a little bit of juice, momentum. They were good. Hosted a regional, couldn't get out of it. Couldn't get to the super. Couldn't get over the hump. Then hit a lull period where they weren't very good. Just very, very, very average. Missed the SEC tournament, I think, 2 years in a row. And bang. Just like that, flips the switch. Nobody had them in their top 25 in the entire country preseason. They were an afterthought. Most people, I would say, if you talk to most experts in the business, most experts would have told you that they won't be in the SEC tournament, never mind the NCAA tournament, and hosting a super regional. So kudos to Coach Mingione. Kudos to that program, how they did it. I mean, they got a Division II guy from Erskine closing games. Like, they do it different. And in this venue, like I said, in this building, like, they might have the secret sauce to get to that final on 2 Mondays from now.
They're not you got these 8 teams in here. They're not the best at anything, but they do everything really, really well. And I mean, you saw how they beat Oregon State to get to the College World Series. Like, you got a kid who ran the bases really hard and scored from second base on a pass ball because the pitcher got lazy for a second. Like, that pretty much sums up Kentucky in a nutshell, that if there's an opportunity, they're going to take it. And they've been doing it all year. And it was, well, Kentucky's playing hot at the beginning of the year. And then it got to the middle of the year, and, hat tip to you, but you had to start to recognize that this team was for real, and they haven't stopped winning. First College World Series appearance, like, that's incredible. And to do it coming out of that conference at a program that has never really been that notable in the upper echelon of college baseball, to be where they are right now, it doesn't look like they're going away. This is one of the cooler stories amongst a lot of very cool stories in the College World Series, but them being first time appearance here, and they might make some noise. Like, this might not be one of those, like, we're happy to make it type of deals. They got as good a chance as anybody to win it. I mean, they beat A&M in Florida during the regular season. Like, who's to say they can't do it again?
And don't forget too, they were co-champions in the regular season for the SEC. Like, this is not like, and I know they were the 3 seed in the tournament because that's the way the SEC does it with the East and the West, and they lost the tiebreaker because Tennessee took 2 or 3 in Lexington in, I believe, early April or late March. But I mean, it's a long time ago. Like, and I believe there were 3 one-run games, and I could be slightly off on that, but I believe there were 3 very close games. And, that's the number 1 overall seed. Like, this team has been really good all year, and everyone wanted to write them off when they lost 2 or 3 to Kennesaw State, and that was it. They were a fluke. They weren't that good. The schedule was easy early on, and they have just flipped a switch since that weekend, towards the end of February. I guess it was the first week of March, but be careful with the Wildcats. That's all I'm going to say.
Careful with the Cats. All right, moving on to the second bracket here. Another cool story. Florida State Seminoles. They go from dead last in the ACC to College World Series in 1 year, which is wild. I mean, Link Jarrett's got Florida State back to where that program expects to be. Obviously, you had the College World Series run in Notre Dame, and anybody who's been involved in college baseball is known for a really long time that Link Jarrett is really, really good at his job, and he gets guys to play hard, does a phenomenal job developing guys, and they flipped a switch at Florida State super quick, took the worst team in the ACC back to Omaha. They've been there plenty of times. There's a lot of heritage in that program. They haven't been able to win it, despite all the legendary players and the legendary teams have been a part of it. This might be the year. When you get into a double elimination setup and you've got a guy that can go punch 13 or 14 dudes, and you get a chance to roll him out on full rest, which I'm guessing they're going to throw Arnold game 1, would seem, you don't really back into it's not like a regional where you'd say, hey, we can beat the 4 seed with our number 3 guy. Not really doing that kind of stuff. He's probably going to go toe-to-toe with somebody. And I mean, if that dude's on the mound, they can beat anybody in the country. And if you win game 1 of this, you know how important that is. Like, winning game 1 of this double elimination bracket is massive. It sets you up because you get additional rest days potentially at the back end of it. It's a big deal. I think this team's going to be a tough out because I think that Jamie Arnold can pitch against anybody and stuff it on him. And I think that puts Florida State in an interesting spot heading into this thing.
So this is really cool. And I'm going to hit on what you talked about Jamie Arnold in a second. But I think, like you said, Link, maybe the upset of the century, the upset of the last 10 years, right? Like, Notre Dame going into Knoxville, we obviously given, TV credit with what he's done there in Knoxville. Like, the number one overall seed, they are the best team in the country. He takes Notre Dame in there 2 years ago. They win on Sunday, I think it was. Sunday, get to Omaha. He ends up going back to his alma mater, which is really cool story. He's from there. Again, he played there. They're the worst team in the ACC last year. Bang, Omaha. And just that quick. They're 24-0 to start the year. Talked about this a couple of weeks ago. They lost to Clemson. They were up 10-0 or something like that on Clemson. Ended up losing. That was their first loss of the season. They just been super consistent in and out all year. Like, just day in and day out. Just one of the best teams one of the 8 best teams in the country. That's who they have been since March 15th when we kicked this thing off. They've been one of the 8 best. So pumped to see that they're back. They deserve it. Here's the crazy part, and you're gonna be like, you watch way too much college baseball. So Tennessee, who we're gonna hit on here in a second, we're gonna hit on TV. Tennessee's legit. They're number 1 overall seed. Last year, they're legit. Tennessee is gonna go from facing in Omaha. Okay. Last year, their opening round starter who they faced was Paul Skeens. And now they have to face Jamie Arnold, who probably, I would argue, is the best starting pitcher in terms of like draft stuff left in this tournament. Right? Like, am I missing somebody? I don't think so. Like, in terms of like stuff. So Tennessee is going to go from being the best team in the country 3 years ago, getting upset by Link Jarrett and Notre Dame on Sunday in a super regional, to having to open with Paul Skeens the following year in Omaha, that did their job, got to Omaha. And now they have to face Jamie Arnold, who most would argue has the best stuff left in this tournament this year. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. That matchup with Tennessee is going to be, because that offense, I guess we'll move into Tennessee, the Volunteers, Tony Vitello. Like, I know he ruffles some feathers. I know that team a couple years ago had some antics that turned a lot of people off. I don't see that in this team. Whatever he's done, he's been able to toe the line of letting those kids be themselves, but also playing with discipline, and they play hard. This is a different Tennessee team, in my opinion. They are absolutely electric offensively, and if you let them get rolling, they will bury you. Absolutely bury you. And they can do it top to bottom. I mean, Christian Moore is he's an alien. The ball he hit out in game 3 against Evansville, 93-mile-an-hour fastball. It wasn't even top of the strike zone. It was above the strike zone with lift. Guy throwing from a higher slot. He's got that lift fastball where people are trying to pitch at the top of the zone because kids are taught, and a lot of swings work this way where guys lose their barrel a little bit early trying to elevate. Christian Moore somehow, some way, is able to keep his hands above the ball long enough to stay behind that thing and just hits an absolute rocket ship off of the center field batter's eye. And he does it. It just seems like every time you turn on a game, the dude's hitting a big home run. And it's pull side and it's dead center, and he's hitting balls out to right center. Like, that park isn't going to hold him if he gets on one. Like, I mean, it's dumb power. He's super polished. Like, we went back to like Caglione and star power. Like, Christian Moore that is star power. There's another team that we're going to talk about in a minute that has star power. And their starters haven't been great in the NCAA tournament. It hasn't hurt them. But if you let these guys start off hot, like, you have to keep them down early because if you let one rally can turn into the whole game for you. Like they can put up a 6 behind, like it's game over because they don't let their foot off the pedal. This group plays hard. I think they're, like I said, I think they're a little bit different than the Tennessee teams that people might hold in their memory of having some antics and stuff. Like I think they're the perfect combination of personality and toughness, which I think is Tony Vitello in a nutshell. Like there's some personality there, but like if you don't think that dude is as tough and competitive as anybody in college baseball, like you're crazy. And I feel like this team has his personality. And when you're trying to win a national championship, being able to play loose like that, like this team's awesome.
Yeah, I love this team. I've loved this team for a few years now. I was kind of the minority with Tony and, how he had run his operation and stuff like that. There was, a lot of people pushing back that, they're letting the inmates run the asylum or whatever term you wanted to use. I didn't ever agree with it. And mainly because of the fact that it's like you see that these guys play and these kids have his back more than anybody. I mean, there was an incident 2 years ago, and again, I don't believe that this team is quite as unpolished as the 2021 team was, or 2022 team. I'm sorry, quite as unpolished as the 2022 team. But these are guys that are willing to do anything for their head coach. It's a big deal. I think it's a huge deal, and I think. The one knock I think you can give on Tennessee this year, and I think this is a very, very, very fair knock, and this is coming from somebody who is a fan of this school, or this program, and this coaching staff, is that I think the pitching, they don't have the dominant frontline pitching, which I think it's fair. I think that's really fair. Like they're running out a reliever and with one out in the second inning on Friday, game one, like. Against Evansville, and again, Evansville had a phenomenal year. Whatever, we had them the whole way, but it's the number one overall seed. And you're running out a reliever in the second inning with one out. I think that's a fair knock at them. Do I think they're really good? Yes, I think this offense is really good. I've said on this podcast before, Christian Moore. I think the fact that he's not a Golden Spikes finalist is a joke. And I think the other part of this is that, like Andy said, is like the offense can bury you. But I also think that that's a little concerning for them with Jamie Arnold on Friday afternoon. Is that I don't know if you can bury Jamie Arnold. His stuff's really, really, really good. And in a situation where you're going to be in a big venue, if the wind is blowing in, I think they could easily run into an issue. And again, I love this team. I think this team is phenomenal. I think this team could easily win a national championship in 2 weeks from tonight. But I think that there are definitely some concerns with them. With the venue, the matchup against Jamie Arnold, et cetera, that could give them a little bit of fits. The one thing I do want to say is that, and again, I'm a huge fan of this coaching staff, and I think Tony Vitello has done a phenomenal job. A lot of people don't know this. Tony Vitello has won more regionals than the entire Tennessee program has won prior to him getting there. So before you want to throw your shade, before you want to say you're letting whatever, just remember that real quick. This guy has won more regional finals, gotten them more, and again, there was no supers for a long time, so it just has won more regional finals and gotten his team to 4 super regionals. This program had only won 3 regional finals prior to him getting there. It's pretty impressive, man. You got to tip your hat to him.
No, it's just
phenomenal job.
It's wild. And you're not talking about a program that has been it's not really a blue blood. I think they'd been to the College World Series 2 times in their history before he'd gotten there. And, they're working on number 3 now. The interesting thing about Tennessee, right, is because we're talking about their pitching and the starting pitching, and that it's, might not be quite as good as everybody else in the tournament, but they actually have the best ERA of any staff in the College World Series. And I believe they're third in the country in terms of ERA. So it's more quality by collection of arms than it is we're just going to run out a dude that's going to go stuff it on you. There are a bunch of starters that are going to go stuff it on you. So it's an interesting place to be, because I think it's easy to remember what happened this past weekend, where they basically only got one good start, right? They got the good start in game 3. Starter in game 1 really struggled, but over the course of the year, this has been the third best pitching staff in the country by a lot of metrics, right? They're number 3 in ERA, they're number 2 in WHIP, they're number 22 in strikeout per game. They walk less than 3 guys a game. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. Does that staff show up, because they haven't been quite as good these last couple weeks as they may have been throughout the year? So interesting thing to map. And we're gonna go to the other side of the table here, and we're gonna go up to Charlottesville for UVA, which I think the biggest chink in their armor is I don't think they're great on the mound, right? 5.4 ERA. They're 131st in the country in WHIP. They're only striking out 8.5 guys a game. They're walking 4.5 guys a game. But they're the complete opposite end of the spectrum here, is that for the course of the year, this hasn't been a great UVA pitching staff, especially by the standards that they've set in that program. But the last 3 weeks, they've been awesome. And they've gotten some big innings out of some guys who haven't been great all year. And I think what you can see sometimes during the course of the season is that you have to use more guys because of the nature of the schedule and just how the season works. When you get into a regional or a super or a College World Series, you're only throwing dudes you want to throw. So like your 4th and 5th best bullpen arm, if you have to throw them, it didn't go right. Right. It's different than a 3-game set in a conference weekend or a midweek game where like you're going to give that guy some innings because, maybe, you're trying to develop that guy. Like it's crunch time now. So you're only going to dudes that you trust. And that the best version of Virginia's pitching staff has showed up the last couple of weeks. The offense is electric. It might be the most complete offense in the tournament. In terms of like when you look at up and down that lineup, there's power, there's speed, they hit for average. I mean, Mac is quietly the best hitting coach in the country. I mean, it's insane how consistently good they are offensively every single year. And they have a type, like having coached against them for 3 years. Harrison Didowak and the Sauke kid, like they look like all the other outfielders from UVA that they've had historically. They're tall, they're lanky, they're able to learn how to hit and manage at bats, and they leverage their strength. And I think Didowak he had the most home runs in UVA history single season this year. I think he had 23. I love that offense. I'm still not a believer in the pitching, but if that version of their staff can show up this week, that's been pitching the last couple weeks, and they're able to use that bullpen, they would have been able to use it, and they've been getting some really good innings out of some guys like Augustine and Wolfwork, who weren't great all year long. Like if they get that version, once again, like it's another team that can legitimately win this thing.
Yeah, they get that on. I mean, I don't really have much of a different take than you do. Like if the UVA Cavaliers that showed up the last 2 weeks with Wolfwork throwing rockets with hammers and their offense is going to do their. I guess my one other take would be, and this would be slightly different than yours, is like, does the ballpark, and we hit on this a little bit, does the ballpark play where like they're just hitting rockets and they're caught because the wind's blowing in? Like, do they run into that issue? And I think they could run into that issue, especially if the pitching's not there. But if the pitching's there, I don't even know if that even matters for them. Like, they're another team that you're like, and again, 8 of these teams, you're just going through the list, like, okay, well, yeah, if the wind's blowing in, like that's gonna, it's gonna, pose an issue for somebody. But like, they're good. They're also good enough on the mound that, or at least what we've seen the last 2 weeks is good enough on the mound. They can still win because, like Kentucky, they're probably a step down from Kentucky, but like in terms of dynamic offense, not just hitting the ball out of the yard, dynamic offense are probably your second best dynamic offense in this tournament. So, like, if the wind is blowing in, like, does it even matter? Like, because Brian O'Connor and Mac, like you said, like, they've been to this thing. They know how it works. Shoot, Brian O'Connor was born there. Like, they know how the weather works there. That's a huge advantage. Will that play a part in, how some of these guys coach this thing? And again, you have a lot of guys back from, that have been here before and know what the way the weather plays. But Virginia also has another style of offense that they can play when they don't have to hit the ball out of the yard. And I think that's a huge part for them if they can just pitch enough. And maybe they don't even have to be as good as what they've been the last 2 weeks, which has, again, been really, really, really good and really impressive. But they have that dynamic offense that they might be able to do it too, because they can do it a little bit of a different way as opposed to some of the other teams in the field.
I mean, make no mistake about it. O'Connor and Mac they've built this team to win in Omaha. I mean, everybody can run. All their outfielders can run. Every single guy they run out there in the outfield is a center fielder, essentially. And that's not by mistake. Like, everybody wants athletes. Like, don't get me wrong. Everybody wants athletes, but you can't look across college baseball and just see a bunch of deer in the outfield. And that's kind of what they do. Like, it's a big outfield. UVA's park is big, so it kind of, in some ways, mimics Omaha a little bit. Like, they got a deep center field, and that place can play really big at times. But make no mistake, like, they're built this way for a reason. It's not just to win the ACC. Like, they recruit these types of players in guys that play a very specific way. It's not a mistake that their teams look very similar for the last 15 years. It's because they have a type that they think can win them a national championship. And little side note, they're the only ACC team since 1950 to win a national championship. So they're doing something right. And outside of Florida, this UVA team under O'Connor has been in the College World Series more than anybody else. 7 times. 7 times since 2009. So in 3 of the last 4 years. They had a little lull between 2016. They were back in the tournament in 17, and then they missed the NCAA tournament completely for 3 consecutive seasons. And, now you're seeing the national championship caliber UVA teams that, we saw in that 2010 to 2015 range where they could have won it every year and probably should have won it twice. I would argue, having coached against them, that the 14 team was actually better than the national championship 15 team, which is a wild thing to say, but that 14 team was absolutely ridiculous.
The funny thing too with that is that you brought that up, is that there is a lot of people, and I agree with you, but I also, you hear a lot that the 15 team who lost to Virginia with Vanderbilt was better than probably the 16 team that won it all.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's nuts, but just the way it is. But it's all good.
All right. Last squad, another ACC team. Tennessee is the only SEC team in this quad. We got the Tar Heels out of Chapel Hill, who we were talking about star power with Caglione and Christian Moore. I'm sure there's some other guys out there that we're not mentioning. Everybody's got some talented players, but Vance Honeycutt is a thoroughbred. And he's probably the best. He's the best non-catcher defender in college baseball, I would say. I know there's definitely metrics that support that in terms of like defensive run saves and all that kind of stuff. But you just watch that kid roam center field. Like he's a big leaguer defensively right now. And he seems to have a knack for the big moment. This lineup is really long. Casey Cook is just like a professional hitter playing left field for them. The Gallagher kid is awesome. He's going to be, I think I said this last podcast, but like that kid is going to be a nightmare to deal with for the next 2 years in the ACC. I really like their bullpen. I think they got a good mix of guys that do different things. So you can mix and match with like some legit power arms, but they come from both sides. They come from slightly different slots. The pitch mix is slightly different, which I think is big in today's game, that you don't give some of these really electric offenses a chance to see similar type guys in back-to-back scenarios, because they're that good with the amount of data that you have, that if you start seeing bullpen guys multiple times or guys that look similar, these guys catch on to it, and it's harder to get through some of these deep lineups. So I think that's an advantage for them. I mean, it's a pretty cool story coming out of there. They're back in the World Series for the first time in a little while. And, you know, Scott Forbes, been there a long time, you know, been a big part of the UNC tradition. This is an interesting ball club that they do have that legitimate star power, and I'm wondering if it can carry them to their first title.
Yeah, they're a team that I feel like you look at this bracket, and you know you haven't watched a lot of college baseball this year, or you just watch a little bit like the regional and the super regional stuff. You're like, yeah, like it's a really good resume, but they got Vance Honeycutt, but like they're just okay. And all they've done is just continue to roll. And again, I think that, I know Andy picked him because he's perfect. So he was 8 for 8. But I watch a lot of it too. I mean, I've been adamant about, watching that regional. I thought that regional was probably the best regional in my opinion, top to bottom, with competitiveness. And they just don't seem to really miss. Like they just continue to just roll along. Again, Scott Forbes gets the job. I think they made the ACC tournament, but like barely. They missed the NCAA tournament. People are calling for his job. They want his head gone. He's done. That's it. Let's move on. Good year last year. Bang, right back in Omaha this year. Really good job with that coaching staff. Coach Henry's a phenomenal individual, knows what he's doing with the pitchers, developed a lot of those arms, did a great job this year again. I just think there's a lot of really cool stories. Like, and am I going to pick them? No. And I'll probably be wrong because at this point, like with what they've done, they just continue to show up every day, day in and day out. And they've been really, really, really good the whole year. And like, I'm looking at my bracket here and I'm like, all right, well, I like this team. I like this team. I like this team. And it's almost like you don't even notice North Carolina, but what they've done is we should be noticing them. They got an absolute star in center field. They got multiple older guys. They got Division III transfers in a lineup. They got multiple guys that are older. I wouldn't count them out. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to pick them, but I wouldn't count them out because all they've done all year is just continue to show up every night.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you got the 8 best teams in the country right now, but this is the first time in a long time of watching college baseball where I think you can legitimately see a scenario where every one of these teams can win the College World Series. It hasn't been like that in the past, and people say, "Oh, well, it's the College World Series. Like anything can happen." Like, no, not really. Like every year you come into this, and there's 2 or 3 teams that you're like, they can't win it. And I don't think when you look at, especially when you look at how these games are broken out. Okay, UNC starting off with Virginia. We hit on the importance of game one. Then you got Tennessee at Florida State. So you got premier lefty in the country going up against maybe the most dynamic offense in the country in terms of just the pure firepower. Well, Tennessee's probably the better team on paper, but as well as anybody, like if Jamie Arnold comes out and has got his good stuff, like he could punch 14 and go 8 and give up 1. Like it's really hard to beat a team when you only score 1.
No, yeah, you get the win, and you got that's the evening game too. So you got to remember, there's going to be at least 4, maybe 5 innings with the shadows. Like you're dealing with a lot.
Yeah, good luck handling that dude when he's throwing in a mix of shadows. Which, by the way, poor engineering to make that something that comes into play here. But
one day we're building this thing for like 30 years too. We couldn't have got the cloud coverage. Like,
but we got, and then you got Kentucky, NC State. Like the two, I think they're the 2 most interesting teams in this that are going to face off. And like, if NC State throws Highfall out there, like he's the stud, but Kentucky has the kind of offense that can win against those guys. And we talked about that they can bunt, they can double steal, like they'll hit and run. They're super aggressive on the bases. Like they're a team that when you face a big time arm, they can win without having to leave the yard or without having to do it with one swing, which is kind of the default with the way that baseball's headed, is that at times it seems like offenses have reserved themselves to, well, these guys are so good, we can't get multiple hits off them. So let's try to leave the yard every time. And like, that's how we're going to win, with a walk and a bolt. It's like Earl Weaver, you win with the 3-run home run, but Kentucky has a type of offense that can overcome that. And I think that makes them really unique. And then you got A&M Florida, like you got a premier SEC matchup. I'm assuming that Caglione is going to go game 1. Like, once again, if Florida gets out of the gate here and wins game 1, like good freaking luck. So with that being said,
a lot of really cool storylines. Like just as you kind of went through that, you kind of look at it and you're like, no, we hit on this, like that we think that both or all 8 teams can definitely win it. But the more you break it down, it's like, man, I love Tennessee. I think Tennessee, I'm not even a math guy, but like one team in the last 25 years has won the national championships, the number 1 overall seed. I love Tennessee. I think at some point we're going to break that. But if they lose on Friday to Florida State and Jamie Arnold, like I'm done if I pick them. Like they're not. I don't believe that they're deep enough to really go through that losers bracket on the mound. I know you had some good stats with them with their pitching throughout the year. I just don't think that they're quite good enough to get through that losers bracket. So like, well then what do you pick?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to pull up something real quick before we get to our picks. Let me see if I can find it. I want to find the exact date. Okay. So this actually predates Omaha, and it predates the 18 field. But I think this puts in perspective how unique what we're seeing in the College World Series is right now. All right. There's only two conferences that are represented in the College World Series, the ACC and the SEC. It is the first time since 1948 when USC played Yale in Kalamazoo, Michigan, that this has been the case. And it wasn't even an 8-team tournament at that point. The College World Series was a 3-game set between two teams. Another little fun fact about that. Do you know who played first base on that team? The Yale team, excuse me?
President Bush?
Yeah, George H.W., or whoever the first one was. How wild is that? And this might be for a longer conversation, but this might be the new norm. Unless the Big 12, which I do think the Big 12 gets in the mix. But with the portal and the money and the facilities, like the ACC SEC dominance is going to be the thing that you're going to see. And you got to hope that some of these Big 12 teams like Oklahoma State and Oklahoma and so on and so forth are able to nudge into this. But well, actually, Oklahoma's going to the SEC next year. So,
yeah, I would say like your kind of your thoroughbreds, Oregon State, Arizona, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. You know who I
ECU,
super impressed with. ECU obviously has been there through and through.
But yeah,
maybe UCF, somebody like that. USF, obviously, they just hired Mitch Hannons this week. I think that's a big deal. I think he'll do a phenomenal job there. But yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of what we're looking at here.
All right. Let's make our picks, my friend. What do you got in bracket one, the UNC, UVA, Tennessee, Florida State bracket?
So I'm going to take Tennessee. I think they figure out a way to get past Jamie Arnold. I'm not confident in this pick, to be honest with you guys. Like, I'll be very transparent. They could be 2 in a queue, to be honest with you. I think if they run into 2 games, wind's blowing in, Jamie Arnold's really good on Friday, they could be going home on Sunday, but they've just been so consistent day in and day out the last 30 days. I just think, I don't know, Christian Moore against star power. Like, I think they figure out a way to get it done. They might have to win a real head scratcher on Friday. You know, how they do it, I don't know. But I think they'll get it done, and I think they're going to get into that final. I think we'll see them on Monday in 2 weeks.
I've been all over the map on who I want to pick out of this bracket because of exactly what you're talking about. Like, I think Tennessee's the best team, but that whole Jamie Arnold wrinkle is a tough one. But I think this is going to be Tennessee and UNC, and I think Tennessee's going to win out, and I think Tennessee will be playing in the finals here against a to be determined bracket 2 winner. So I'm gonna ride with you on this one, Jonathan. I think Tennessee's gonna find a way to beat Arnold, and then I think they're gonna be a really tough out after that. Yeah, I don't know who else beats them in that bracket.
I think if you just look at it, right, like if they can figure out a way to, if you go into it and you say, hey, we're just going to figure out a way to win Friday, I think they're a tough out then after that.
Yeah. All right, bracket 2. What do you got?
I mean, since the middle of April, I've said that I thought this was the best team in the country. I think this offense is built for this stadium, wind in, wind out, shadows, the whole deal. I think we're gonna have an SEC matchup. We're gonna have Tennessee and Kentucky in the finals in 2 weeks.
I want to pick NC State here.
I do too, by the way. If they were in the other pod, that would have been a slam dunk. Like it wouldn't even been close. I'll be honest with you.
I want to pick NC State. Man, and I'll tell you what, this hurts, but I think Florida's gonna win the freaking bracket. I think they beat A&M in game one. And yeah, I think Florida's gonna come out of this thing. I think it's gonna be Florida Tennessee. I think it'll be an SEC matchup again, but I think it's gonna be Florida Tennessee in the finals.
I think, like I said, kind of only opened. Like I think you have that Ole Miss 2022 feel, right? Like last team in, kind of make a run, the whole kind of deal with Florida. Again, they're the best reliever in the country, or one of the best relievers in the country. Like, yeah, I don't disagree with you. Again, like
they're the team that they were supposed to be right now in the most important part of the year. This is the team that they were expected to be in February.
On February 15th, this is who they were supposed to be, and now on June, whatever today is, the 12th, 11th, they are that team. And they're really, really good. So I don't disagree with you on that. Like I said, I felt like that. They feel like that Ole Miss feel. But I think, it's cool, man. Like, it's like we could be way off. Like, both our teams could be out on Sunday and Monday. And I would be like, yeah, like I wouldn't be shocked by it. You know what I mean? And both our teams could be in it, in 2 weeks from now. So I think that's really cool. And I think that's, like you said, the first time in a long time that we've been watching college baseball and really analyzing it, that we have 8 teams that can legitimately get to, to that Monday, in 10 days or 12 days from now.
Who's your title winner? Who's taking it home?
I'm gonna take Kentucky.
I like it.
I don't know. I picked them in the middle of April. I watched them. I thought they were awesome. I've watched them a lot. I watch a lot of SEC baseball. I watch a lot of baseball, as you guys know. The way the park plays, it will be different. I think it'll actually be almost tougher for them to win the title than it will be to get to the title. Just because I think with the way they play, they're so dynamic with the shadows, the wind blowing in, stuff like that. But I think once they get there, I think they have such a loose style of play. Again, they can beat you so many different ways. You're going to have to play really good defense. You're going to have to be able to, hold runners on. They'll double steal. They just do different things. I'm going to take the Wildcats.
I'm going to get off the Florida train here, and I think Tennessee takes one back to Rocky Top. I think they do it in 3 games. I think it's going to take them 3 games to do it. I think Vitello's going to take a championship back to Knoxville, and we'll see if Texas wants to pay him $2 million to come and coach that program after he wins the title.
Rumors he's getting an extension at Tennessee for 2.5. So
yeah, but there they are. Those are the picks. I got the Volunteers.
Yeah, like I said, I think I'm not a numbers guy, but at some point, the number 1 overall seed is going to win it.
I got 2 interesting picks. Number 1 overall seed to win it, and you got the first time ever in the College World Series. They're going to take it down. Both would be really cool.
Both would be phenomenal. If we got both, it'd be phenomenal.
Any parting thoughts, Coach?
Lock in. The next 12, 14 days are going to be awesome. It's going to be really, really, really cool. Especially when you have, one site, you don't have to worry about flipping channels, the whole deal. And they do a great job. I will give the media credit, like, in terms of ESPN and the coverage. Like, they've done a phenomenal job this year, I think, in terms of, like, staggering games and really being able to allowing the game to grow. So I'll tip my hat to everybody involved in that. Phenomenal job. But when you can lock into one game, basically, I think it's a 4 or 5 hour window. They give each game, lock in, watch it. These games are going to be fun. They're going to be wildly entertaining. Lock in, have some fun, and continue to allow college baseball to grow the game.
I'm going to be very interested to see the viewership numbers because there was a lot of records broken during the regionals and the supers. And yeah, I mean, I think this is the next big step for college baseball. They're not competing against a ton of other television. You got some NHL hockey and, you're going to overlap a little bit with the NBA championship, but timing wise, like, I think there's going to be some records broken. I think there's going to be attendance records. I think the viewership records are going to be up. Jello shots might be down a touch.
No, I don't.
You think they're going to maintain?
Not being in the mix. I mean, we're not going to get 68,000. We had 68,000 last year, right? Like,
I think that's something crazy like that.
We're not going to break that record. But what I do think is going to happen, I think, and I will hit on this because I wanted to hit on this earlier. Tennessee is going to show out at record pace. I think the interesting one will be A&M because I think A&M might not show up because, like what you hit on with Andy with the injuries. I think that's a little bit of a concern. But I think BBN, Big Blue Nation, could show out in epic proportions. And I know I picked them, so everyone's discrediting me. I think Big Blue Nation will show out in epic proportions because it is the first time in Omaha. They've heard about it. They can legitimately win the whole damn thing. I think we can have a huge turnout between Rocky Top and Big Blue Nation. And there could be...
And they could be in the final, which means that those fans are there for a while.
Thousands of Jello shots being sold.
Yeah, we'll keep a tab on that one. See if they can break the record.
I'll send a Trey. If they're in a final, I'll send a Trey. You can put that. You can mark me down on the record for that.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed. We'll check in next week and we'll break something down. Talk to you then. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.